Um,
Sorry, I had the sound off. Um, I'm gonna have Razib Khan join me in just a few minutes. I'm already running a little behind, so I don't want to be too late. But there was just one thing did want to share real quick with all of you who are here already. Um, I've spent many of the past days of the past couple weeks reflecting on. Now there should be sound, right? I've been reflecting on. Can you confirm there is sound? Yeah, there is. Right. I've been reflecting over the past couple weeks on, if my academic career were to, for some reason, which I can't talk about, um, go missing all of a sudden, if I were to be thrown onto my own devices, what would I do? And obviously, I mean, sooner or later, I'd probably have to get some sort of real job, maybe. But I was like, well, probably what I'd want to do is spend a couple weeks just full time seeing what I could come up with in terms of making for myself, turning like all of my internet stuff into some sort of like viable operation that maybe I could work really hard on, put more time into it than I currently am, and build it up into a more significant thing that people find valuable, and maybe come up with some sort of way in which they feel like it'd be worth it to them to throw a little bit of money each month. And so, as I've mentioned before, over the past few days, I've only kind of just been unrolling this over the past week or so. I am lucky enough and how should I say? Yeah, I'm lucky enough that a few people already have come out of the woodwork to throw some money at me. And so I have something like 30 patrons now, which is really awesome. But that was just even without offering any rewards. That was just people, I guess, who have been into what I'm doing and wanted to, help out to build up these projects that I'm working on. So, that got me hard at work thinking about how I could kind of build up some sort of model where maybe I could give even more value for money and come up with some sort of system, some sort of monetization model that isn't corny, and I'm not like constantly begging for money. I'm not constantly shilling things, but that gives people who are really interested in everything that I'm doing, more stuff, more content that they would value. So I basically sent a lot of messages to a lot of people, my fans or whatever you want to call, people who watch all my stuff and read my blogs and stuff, and to the first 30 patrons that I have, I did some polling to try to get some information on what people wanted. And I got a lot of input. I got a lot of responses on the polls that I did. And basically, what I now want to do real quick is just share with you the model that I've kind of worked out as something that I think it's consistent with what people have told me they would like, and it's something that I think it's some things that I think I can really do well and give a lot of value on. So basically, I have a tentative provisional kind of master plan, a scheme for building up kind of all the stuff I'm doing with the blog and with the live streams in a way that I think, and my own future goals, which mostly have been around writing books, is that's always been what I've been doing for a while, and mostly what I want to do in terms of my own interests and goals. So I basically kind of took all the input and took all my own goals and thoughts and hopes and dreams, and kind of took a step back and reflected on, like, how can I make this work? And here's what I've come up with. And we're just going to see how this go. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to see if this works. Um, my Patreon page has now been updated with the different planks of what I'm just about to announce, but I'm just going to basically share it with you very informally and simply. So if you want more details, check there. But here's the long and short of it. Like many kind of, Patreon setups, the first, if you could just give $1, if everyone who enjoys what I do and all this kind of stuff that I'm putting out, if you could, at a bare minimum, like if you could just give $1 a month, that would be really awesome. More than enough to kind of compensate me and to count yourself like a dutiful, paying member of this larger thing that I'm trying to do. But up from that, what I'm doing is this: if people are interested in all of the stuff that I've been thinking and the larger ideas I've been working on for a few years now, well, I have a hard drive that is filled with content, with short essays, with unfinished blog posts, I have actually multiple book manuscripts that are mostly done, a bunch of data analyses that haven't been written up yet. I just have all of this work that I've done over the past few years, and a lot of it is quite interesting, valuable stuff. It's just with my academic responsibilities, I haven't had the time to, clean it up, polish it up, package it up, and then sell it to someone like a agent or whatever, like some institutionalized figure. But the content is there, and a lot of it is really awesome, and I'm quite proud of a lot of it, and I want to just push it forward. So basically, one idea in the larger scheme I have is, I'll just take all this good stuff on my hard drive and throw it up on Patreon. And for those of you who are interested, for just like $5 a month, if anyone is so interested that they'd like to cough up $5 a month, I'm basically going to give you a kind of inside look at my hard drive, like all of the kind of stuff that I think is the coolest, best stuff that I've done over the past few years that's just kind of sitting in pieces on my hard drive as I figure out what to do with it. All these things will become more, completed, valuable end products like books or whatever they might be. But there's no reason why, if you want to help out financially, there's no reason why I can't in return just give you kind of a secret sneak peek into most of the good stuff that's hiding on my hard drive. So I'm going to do that for anyone who wants to cough up about £5 or $5 or more. I'm sorry, per month. And finally, the last one I want to talk about now is just, for one bump up, for anyone who wants to give up to as much as $15 a month. I know that's a lot for a lot of people, so don't feel like you have any obligation to do this. But for people who want to give 15 a month, I'll put your name in my first published book, in the acknowledgments, because the way that I see it is, at that level, you're basically kind of making me totally reevaluate my options. Like, you're beginning to kind of replace institutional grant bodies. If like a large number of people were to give as much as 15 a month, that really starts to add up. So that would deserve like a serious thank you in a serious place. And I would owe you a lot for really kind of helping me to be more independent. And finally, and this is, I think, the real innovative thing, which I'm curious to see how much uptake there is. There might be, there might not be, but it's kind of innovative, and I think it's a really cool idea. For $25 a month, if anyone is so inclined to part with $25 a month, I'm going to host PhD level, like graduate school level seminars on the internet for small groups, no larger than than 5 people per group. And anyone who's interested in taking a kind of PhD level seminar with me in small groups can have that type of experience one time each month, every month, for about 25 a month, or anyone who gives more than 25 a month. So this is based on feedback. A lot of people told me that this is the kind of thing that they want, and like live kind of feedback on their own work, and kind of a live intellectual community that they can build up and be a part of themselves. That's what a lot of people told me that they wanted. So this was a kind of funding model or pricing model that, I could manage in terms of the time it would take. and that I think would give people like the greatest value for money. So we're going to experiment with monthly seminars at a kind of graduate school level, which means it's led by the participants. It's led by you all who want to do it. So it's basically an opportunity for you to work on your own projects, to share your own projects, and to get like professional level feedback from other like really smart, thoughtful people. And so, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll be writing much more about this and explaining this stuff in more detail, but that's the long and short of it. And it's all set up on Patreon to sign up for these things if they're interested to you. And if they're not, of course, that's totally cool. So that's just my spiel. I'm not going to have a long spiel like this all the time, but since it's brand new today, I just wanted to share that with you. Cool. So now I'm going to bring in Razib. Let's do this. Hang tight. Just got to go to Twitter. All right. I sent the link to Razib. We should be joined by him shortly. And until then, let's take a load off. All right. Can you hear me, Razib?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you see me?
I see you and I hear you. You see me and you hear me?
Yeah, I have two screens, so it's duplicated right now.
Okay. Is it cool for you?
Yeah. So
All right.
can people... Oh, whoa, that's me now.
Yeah, you if you're watching on YouTube, you want to kind of shut that down, but you can pop out the public chat separately if you want to follow that.
Okay. I guess I can do that.
You can also ignore the public chat and I can kind of monitor if you want. I'm looking at it.
Okay. All right, that sounds fine. All right, so yeah, I guess I'm here. Let's do this.
All right. Thanks for agreeing to talk with me.
Yeah, it just kind of happened randomly because I was asking you, because I started another podcast and I was like asking you how you run your stuff. So, you know.
Right. How's that coming along? Do you want to tell us about that, by the way?
Yeah, I mean it's fine. I call it like the Brown Pundits Browncast. So I've run this. So I have a primary podcast that's part of my day job as a geneticist. It's called The Insight. That's doing really well, and we have an editor, and I have my boss is the co-host, and so we have guests sometimes, and that's kind of a professionally run thing. I've had a side blog. I have a lot of blogs actually, but I've had a side blog for about 7 years called Brown Pundits. It's just like a friend of mine. He's brown. I'm brown, and it's all about brown things. It's like all my brown content goes there. And so people have been asking us for a podcast. So I figured like, okay, I'll just like set it up, learn how to use Audacity. So I asked you, my friend Josiah Neely, whose podcast I was on, the Urbane Cowboys, actually today. It was published today. And Brown Pundits podcast, you can find it at brownpundits.com. And I put up the first episode on Saturday night. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. It's pretty easy. I don't know like how much I'm gonna do of it, but there's been some demand, and like podcasting is the new thing now. So why not? I mean, I've been blogging since 2002, so I've been around in that space for a while, and mostly like I don't, like you, I don't do the writing thing as my thing. It's something I do for fun.
Yeah.
Podcasting is kind of similar. I mean, I do have the professional podcast, but that's a different issue.
I saw somewhere someone writing about you that I think referred to you as a semi-professional blogger.
I make money off it. Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, that's not I don't get primarily paid to blog.
Right.
Does that make sense? But I make a non-trivial amount of money through my blogging.
That's awesome.
So doing some blogging is part of my regular job as a geneticist at my current position. But I'm not really, that's probably not my primary job. My primary job is do data analysis and figure out the algorithms and all like the quality assurance, all the regular science stuff. But in terms of my blog, I don't monetize it. I have been paid for blogging before. When I was a science blogs, Discover and UNS, I was paid. And then last year I got off UNS and just went independent. Because I just want to do my own thing and not be stuck with other people's platforms and their views and their technical support, which was on their terms. So because I have technical skills myself, so I decided to like resurrect my old gene expression site. But yeah, I mean, I think you can say semi-professional blogger, but it's more of a side hustle.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I'm a semi-professional YouTuber. I think I make like about $5 a month. I think it's $5 a month.
Yeah, I don't know. A semi-professional YouTuber. I don't know if that's the optimal position. I think being a professional YouTuber or just do it for shits and giggles. You
Yes.
know, it's
Yes.
like those are kind of like you kind of want to go towards the two, I would think. But I don't know. I'm frankly a little skeptical of YouTube, but I'm trying it out a little. I've done a couple YouTube videos myself, but it's really not my forum. Like I'm pretty good at writing, I think. Not to be conceited, but I mean I've just done it for a while, so I can do that fast, and it's relatively dense. YouTube seems to have a lot of traffic, a lot of views, but I'm wondering about how permanent it will be. So
Hmm.
I've written I don't know, I've written like over 5 million words, you know, and I can tell you, like, not bragging, but I've had like, tens of millions of people like read my blogs.
Hmm.
So that's had an impact. Now, if I did a YouTube, I probably have, I could, I don't, like I'm not, there's certain YouTubers where it's like they have the optics to do YouTube. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Like Lauren Southern can do YouTube.
I
So
hear
they're
you.
going to get a lot of views, but I don't really know what impact they're having over the long term. Because I know when I watch YouTube sometimes, it's always when I'm doing something else, and I don't really watch it. I'm just kind of half paying attention to it. When you're reading something, you kind of go serial in a serial manner. You focus on it. You don't, you know.
Yeah.
And so I mean that's my main skepticism about YouTube. I mean that affects podcasting a little, but I think when you're listening, that's somewhat of a different way of taking the data in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't have it so planned out. I think that for me, I'm kind of experimenting with all possibilities because I think right now I'm just really attracted to the possibility of somehow carving out a kind of alternative intellectual life, a different type
Mhm.
of intellectual life as an
Sure.
alternative to academia. And I don't know exactly how that would optimally look, but my attitude right now is kind of like I'll just do YouTube a certain amount of times every week, and I'll write blogs a certain amount of time every week, and I'll just do all of these things to some degree, and
Hmm.
just watch and just wait and see, and watch what has the most influence, and watch what takes off, see what maybe people might be willing to pay for, and just have an open-minded experimental attitude towards it.
Yeah, I mean that's the dream. I mean, honestly, I was in academia. I was a graduate student studying genetics for a while, and I realized by the end of it that academic route wasn't going to work for me. I mean, I have a pretty non-conventional personality. I'm also very I don't know, forthright. It might be a little self-flattering, but I'm quite in your face. That can be a little difficult to manage in academia, where you have to kind of, it's very prim and proper in its own ways. But I mean, I still read books. Like I just bought a book on Frederick the Great. Finished a book on trade in the Eastern Roman Empire and Asia, and I'm doing some data analysis. Trying to work on maybe like get a preprint out on some genetic stuff. So
So, are you
that's
mostly
important.
doing freelance stuff for different places, or you work with one company in particular?
For what? For
Well, it sounds like from everything you just said, you have lots of. It sounds like you do lots of things, and a bunch of
Mhm.
different things bring different income streams.
Yeah.
What is your main thing right now?
I,
Would you say?
I'm a I'm a geneticist at a startup, a personal genomic startup in Austin called Insight.
Okay,
And
cool.
previously I had worked as a scientist, content developer, staff scientist at a company called Embark, which was doggy DNA, 23andMe for dogs, also in Austin. And before that, I was a graduate student at UC Davis.
Okay.
But I've done consulting for Family Tree DNA, for National Geographic, on their genetics applications and platforms. And like in terms of my freelance stuff, outside of my primary job. I do some writing for National Review. I've written for India Today recently. The way the writing usually works out is I've let it approach me because, I mean, one, let's be frank, it doesn't pay.
Hmm.
Um, I do it. I just got a speech chat. 1 second.
Yeah, take time.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna close that. Anyway, yeah, the issue with the writing is I kind of think of that as a public service, right? So when I wrote an article on the genetics of India, like last year I wrote a cover story, I think, for India Today, which is like a pretty big magazine in India. So I mean, I got paid, but it wasn't that much. I mean, compared to the per hour what I make in my regular job, but I just thought, well, someone should write about this. And a lot of people in India are scared to talk about it because of political controversies. And I don't live in India, so I don't care, so I'll just say it. And so I have a pretty good relationship with the editor there at National Review. I'm friends with some of the people there. And so I will review books. Like I'm going to review Robert Plomin's book on like DNA Blueprint or something, the new book on behavior genetics. I'm going to review that. I'm getting a review copy. I reviewed David Reich's book, reviewed a book on universities, reviewed Carl Zimmer's book. So I kind of do that just because, I like having my own blog and control my own means of production, but sometimes it's nice to get out of that little box,
But I'm sure you find that even though your blog is only somewhat monetized, like the fact that it brings even a little bit of change each month, like that helps motivate you, doesn't it?
It does. I can tell you what I do. I mean, I'm pretty open about this. It's because
Sure,
I'd
be curious to know. Sure.
I don't do I have a Patreon account mostly because I donate to a couple of things, and I don't solicit that because I don't really want to be dependent on other people.
Yeah.
But I mean, I write just to write, just to get words out there. I obviously have an issue. I mean, I have 3 kids. Like I'm kind of busy right now with life, so I might shut down. Who knows? But I have Amazon affiliates.
Yeah.
And it's totally passive. And I've been making a lot of money. Not a lot, but I've been making like a non-trivial amount of money that way passively for well over a decade, since 2004.
Yeah.
And one thing that I noticed is over Christmas there's gonna be some people buying computers.
Yeah.
And if they click through to check a book from a
Right.
book review, and then they buy a computer, I get money from that, right?
Right.
And so I found that that's been like one of the best ways to do it passively without bothering the users and reducing the just like the friction of it, to get yourself, I mean, like, so when I was younger,
I've set it up too. I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't push it too hard. Like I don't write about books quite as much as maybe I could. But yeah.
Well, I mean, the issue is like if if I write about something, I will always I will cross promote it with a book I've read,
Sure.
and it's like I've read a fair number of books. I mean, so it's like whatever, I can put that up there, and I get a lot of click throughs, and it's as I said, like it's not. I mean, they're gonna buy stuff anyway. You're just
Right.
and I've also like set up accounts with the Amazon UK, Amazon, just like this year actually, Amazon EU and Amazon Canada. And I just got my first check from Amazon UK in pounds, so I gotta figure out how to deposit that. But normally it's like American direct deposit, so that's easy. But that's what I do to monetize that. I think like depending on who you are, I mean, I think I mean you're single, right?
No, I have a wife, but we don't have kids yet.
Yeah, well, that's really what I was more
Yeah.
questioning.
Yeah.
I just feel like if you didn't have kids, if I didn't have kids, it would be much easier to hustle, and because you have more flexibility, you have more freedom. The parameter space is bigger. You can like work your way through lean periods,
Yeah.
But when you have kids, your fixed costs are just gonna be higher.
Right.
And so I feel like my basic attitude is I don't directly monetize my quote unquote public intellectual production too much. I mean, I could, but I don't because like I'd rather focus on like a conventional career that gives me enough freedom that I can do this on the side, and I have bosses that are okay with me doing stuff like this on the side.
Yeah.
And like
sure.
I generally tend to like I will take consulting jobs in genetics type stuff anyway. So I already kind of have a mentality where I do some outside work. So the fact that I do some like writing type stuff is not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Okay. That's all interesting to hear your angle on that. Why don't we get into some of the more interesting, maybe intellectual topics that you and I might both be interested in. Maybe, do you want to start by, I know that you've been writing a lot today about stuff in the news. Do you feel
Dude.
Are you tired of that, or do you want to go over that?
This was yeah, yeah.
If you're tired of it, we could totally just talk about something else.
So no, I'm not tired of it. So I'll go through it really quickly. So the person who did the analysis is a friend of mine. Okay, I know him.
Well, let's tell listeners what we're talking about briefly.
Yeah, so Elizabeth Warman got a bespoke DNA test to confirm whether she had Native American ancestry, and she did. And the estimate basically the estimate using a very conservative method is, say, on the order of like 0.4%. And then 8% of the ancestry was unassigned. Most of that probably is European, but if you did a more liberal conventional analysis, I think it would be closer to like 2%, something like that, right?
Okay.
And the average in the United States for a white American is like, I don't know, like 0.2%. Like it's very close to artifactual, but it depends on what area of the country. Like if you're from Mississippi, a substantial number, like maybe like 10% of white Americans probably have Elizabeth Warren levels of Native ancestry, because that area of the South, where the Cherokee, the Creek, those were regions where there were a lot of densely populated areas of Native people relatively late. Places like New England, they just killed them all really early. The New England whites don't have. If you're old stock like New Hampshire, like not if you're French Quebecois or anything like that. Let's say you're old stock New Hampshire, you don't have very much Native ancestry because the early New Englanders were savage. King Philip's War, this sort of stuff. So anyway, basically it's a big deal because she claimed she was Native or Cherokee, or there was family lore about it. I was just focused on the genetics. I was up because I'm trying to get some work done before I go to American Society of Human Genetics meetings, and this week in San Diego, and I see this come up over the news wires, and I look and I see Carlos did it. Carlos Bustamante, who's genetics professor, very like eminent, well-known guy. He's a cool guy. We're friends. I'm like, oh, okay. And like he doesn't specialize, but he knows a lot about Latin American stuff because he takes a lot of students from Latin America. He's was born in Venezuela, and basically I knew that if Carlos did it, this is legit. This is robust work. It's not shoddy, right? So I was basically like, I went to sleep, and I thought, okay, they're gonna argue over like the cultural and political angles because there's some stuff there which we can talk about later. But it's not like it's above my pay grade. It's not something I'm gonna talk about because one, I'm probably never gonna vote for her anyway, so I don't care. I wake up like I slept about like 4 hours, and I got up, and Twitter, and like I follow a friend of our conservative people because those are my people, like politically more, and they're retweeting just like the Gelman amnesia is. It's where if something is in your field, you read the newspaper and you're like, oh my god, they're so wrong. They even have it backwards.
Oh yeah.
They don't even know how wrong they are. Like they're not even wrong. It doesn't even make any sense. And so I'm experiencing this as I'm looking at my Twitter feed, because there are conservative journalists, and to some extent the mainstream media was getting the numbers confused too. They're Googling numbers and they're comparing numbers, and I'm like, these are apples to oranges. You can't compare these numbers. They're using different methods. They're different, there's the point estimate here, like here Carlos used some like, Bayesian, whatever. There was all sorts of technical issues they were garbling, and some people were saying she's not even any more Native American than the typical white American and all this stuff. And I know the data sets he used. They're large data sets. They're robust. They're the standard ones. I've done similar analysis. What I can say is, like, if you have a hypothesis whether Elizabeth Warren has more than the typical Native ancestry of a typical old stock white American, yes, she does. Like that's hypothesis has been confirmed, okay. Right? Carlos confirmed that. Now, the specific estimate of the percentages, that is a somewhat different question. He didn't really directly answer that. He gave a distribution of when the admixture occurred.
Right.
And from that, people were making weird inferences. I mean, so the brass tacks is like, she obviously had an ancestor, in the 19th century who was probably of a mixed Cherokee background. So I don't know if she was Cherokee because genetics can't prove it. The genetics seems to indicate that this is a Amerindian from North America, because it's placed between Canadian and Mexican indigenous populations when you look at that region of the genome. But obviously, like, we don't have that fine-grained detail, but she has family history that says this. She's from Oklahoma. It's probably Cherokee. Like, you're just being a Bayesian, right?
Sure.
I mean, if you see someone and their genotype says that they have some indigenous ancestry, it's probably going to come from what they have a family history of what they say,
Right.
We can't prove it right now. Maybe we could in the future, depending on how much whole genome analysis we do. But anyway, so science is done. Like, it's really straightforward. There's a really like clear-cut answer to this. Now, the problem is though, conservatives, I guess they have some motivated reasoning about this. They want to say she's a liar, and there's all this issue like, did she use affirmative action? I don't honestly know all the details. I'm probably never going to vote for this woman. So I don't care. Okay. I mean, this is honestly the truth of it. I don't care what she did to get her job. I'm not going to vote for her.
Right.
I'm not a marginal voter. So I don't really care about that. I care about the science of it. If she had zero native ancestry, it's still plausible she had a native ancestress, but it's just, if it's that far back, you might not have any DNA segments, right? So it wouldn't have even, all she did is increase the probability of the hypothesis of the oral history.
Okay.
If
Okay.
she had got, if the results had come back negative, that oral history might still be valid. You know,
Right.
I mean, maybe you would decrease the probability somewhat, but the reality is this has just increased its probability a lot, in my view. Now, whether she is a Native American or not, that's not for me to say. You
Sure.
know, it's just like, it's not for me to say. Like, I'm the real type of Indian. Like, I don't care. I don't know about American Indians.
Yeah,
I don't know. So
it's a good question. Like, how much Native American do you have to be counted for her claims to be legit, like culturally? That's obviously you can't answer
no,
that. That's,
you just said culturally. That's like in the eye of the beholder.
well, that's what I'm saying. But that's an interesting political question. Like I'm saying
Well, that is a
for
political question, but that is a political question. It's not a cultural question. So, like, there are
sure.
blood quanta laws in the United States, not laws, but like tribal rules of blood quanta, but they're not genomically validated. So, for
Right.
example, if your grandparent is a full member of a tribe, you have some of the benefits. But if it was your great grandparent and you have no other, then you don't. You know.
I see. Yeah. Sure. Sure.
But that grandparent might not be 100% native. Most native people, it's very rare to find a native person in the Americas that does not have European ancestry.
Right. Sure. Right. When I said political, I meant more like it would be interesting to ask. Like, I don't know the public opinion data on this, but it would be interesting to see, like, what would a leftist say? How much does Elizabeth Warren have to be Native American for her claims to count as legitimate? And if you
Well,
ask the conservative, how much does she have to be Native American for her claims to count as legitimate? That's kind of an interesting question where people decide to draw that line.
but see, but from the leftists, because like there have been some, I mean, I don't follow this closely, but I know some of it. Some native people, some Cherokee especially, are very angry at Warren for claiming Cherokee heritage and culture.
Okay. Are they? Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's already some petitions like online about how angry they are, and they also are angry about this DNA thing because they think she's trying to validate a cultural thing with a scientific thing, and that's
Right.
not kosher.
Now you were saying that her levels are not that different than what you might find in Mississippi.
From what I've seen and from the scientific literature, so white people across the country, depending on what type of white person, I mean, your last name's Murphy. Are you like from New England?
Irish American from the Northeast of the
Yeah,
U.S.
you're very unlikely to have, if your ancestry is mostly from like the Great Migration of the famine period.
Yeah.
If it's mostly that, you're unlikely to have native ancestry. The people who have native ancestry that are white Americans are the people that say like Scotch Irish show up in the uplands of Kentucky, Tennessee, Pennsylvania in the mid 18th century.
Right.
Okay, they go in, and some of those people, as you know from like some of the fiction of like that period and a little later in the 19th century, they went native. In
Right.
terms of like there were young boys that are like, I'd rather be an Indian than
Right.
like farm, and so they actually became native and they intermarried with native. So that's one of the things. Like the native tribes themselves were a cultural amalgam. So the Cherokee by the 19th century had a lot of European and some African ancestry.
Gotcha. Sure.
The John Ross, the fact that I like to say is John Ross, the chief during the Trail of Tears, was 7/8 European in ancestry,
Hmm.
right? But he was culturally Cherokee. So for the Europeans, these old stock Europeans, they intermarried somewhat, and some of their genes went into more of their genes went into the Indians, the native people, because there are more of them. Just genetically, the demographic differences. And then you have the native people. Some of them also bled over into the old stock Americans, these settlers, these frontiers people. And genealogically, I would bet that every single old stock American in the white American and probably even black American, because where do they get their white ancestry? Probably have a genealogical line of descent back to a native person.
Interesting.
That doesn't mean that they have any genes identical, any distinctive genes from a Native American. Because if you go back 300 years, you're unlikely to actually have any of that.
Okay.
Does that
Interesting.
make sense?
Yeah,
And
I think so.
so if you go back far enough, you're going to have a line of genealogical descent, but you are unlikely to have any DNA. Elizabeth Warren's level of admixture and her her distance is actually probably around the 50-50 range, working off memory. There's a 50% chance she would have actually gotten any of those distinctive, genes from that individual.
Right. I think that's hard for a lot of people to understand, that you can have a line of descent without that necessarily implying genes.
Yeah, because I think people think of genetics as a blending model where you just blend people together.
But it's a probabilistic model.
It's a probabilistic discrete model. And so you're sampling the genome of your parents, and so you're subsampling.
Right.
Obviously, you're subsampling 50. And so that subsample, I wrote an article for Slate many years ago about how you're not 25% each of your grandparents. Your expected value is 25%. So I have 3 children, all have been genotyped. All their grandparents have been genotyped. I know what fraction they are of each. So my daughter is like 29% my dad and 21% my mom,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I know my son is like 28% his maternal grandmother, and so 22%. And that way I also can tell like his maternal grandmother is half Norwegian, and I can tell that my middle child, my older son, he is highly enriched for being Norwegian, which basically means that he must have a lot of genes, a lot of ancestry from his Norwegian great-grandmother.
Fascinating. Now, right, so you're kind of known for being ahead of the curve on sequencing your kids. I mean, what other kinds of insights were you able to glean from that? Like, what does that help you understand and do for them?
I mean, initially there was nothing that was like super functional. I mean, there's some basic things. Like, I mean, I was talking to my wife about this the other day, and I think she'll be okay with me talking about this. My middle child, we knew before he was born that he was going to have dry earwax. Not a big deal, but this is a characteristic that's really common in Northeast Asia among Koreans, for example. Almost all Koreans have dry earwax, but the majority of the people in the rest of the world have wet earwax, and then people in Africa all have wet earwax. Anyways, my wife and I are both heterozygotes, which means we carry one copy of each. So my oldest and youngest, they have wet earwax. My middle has dry earwax. Now, my sister has dry earwax, and I can tell you that she was apparently taken to the dermatologist for illness when she was young, because doctors that are not habituated towards having Asian, patients thought it was a pathology.
Interesting.
Right? And so, I mean, like, this is just like a small thing where it's like, oh, well, like, I know that he doesn't have some skin, he doesn't have some sort of psoriasis around his ear. His earwax is just flaky, One correlation with that is your sweat glands are smaller, I think. So probably his perspiration is not going to be as much of an issue. So I know little things like that. There was no major disease things. Well, there was one thing that we have. I'm not going to talk about it because it's a family thing, but it's not like a big deal, but it's not trivial. And I have something inherited from my mother. And so we always check a certain region of our children's genome, whether they inherited that from my mother, because I can check to see if they got it from my mom or my dad. And so we always check. It doesn't matter. You don't need to know the variant. We know what gene it's in. And so I know that if they got my mom's copy, because I have it too, and so I have that pathogenic copy, I can tell if my children have it or not. So the issue with your genotype or your genome sequence, which is like all of the positions, the way I explain it to people is that its value only appreciates. It never depreciates, right? Its value is the minimum the day you get it. You get all the insights that you can get from the science at the time, but as science progresses, you'll learn more and more about the variation in your genome, and you already have it.
That's interesting. Now, I'm just curious. So is it like a data set that you have on your computer?
Which one, my son's?
Yeah, like, so you're talking about the value of it appreciating. So is this like when new knowledge comes through, are you able to like rerun your data?
Yeah. So I have raw files, and they're in like I have so most of the data is actually genotype data, which is a small file. It's a small, uncompressed. It's actually compressed. It's like 30 megabytes, small file. But my son's, who got sequenced before he was born, and I think you mentioned that in the introduction. So he's the first healthy baby child documented in the history of the world that was sequenced before he was born. So that's what it is. Right?
That's cool.
So that it was low coverage. It wasn't super high coverage, but in any case, it's on the order of like many gigabytes.
Okay.
And so I have a special folder labeled LLK, Little Lord Khan, So that's like, and like it's all like backed up on Dropbox and stuff like that. Although obviously, like the prices dropped so much, I could just have the whole family sequenced for probably like $4,000 or $5,000 now, maybe cheaper.
Do you think that that's a worthwhile purchase for the average person at this point?
It's an opportunity cost. So I mean,
Yeah.
average person in Silicon Valley, yes. Average person in Des Moines, probably not.
How much is it now to do like one child, let's say?
Basically, medical grade whole genome sequencing will run you $999 from Veritas, right? Which is a consumer company, consumer oriented company in Boston. There's ways you can get the price cheaper. Basically the raw data that's returned, like the level of quality that is demanded by medical grade genomics, is a little bit of an overkill. You can like reduce the quality and pretty much get like 98, 99% of the information and have a cheaper price point. It's just called reducing the coverage on the sequencing. So you could probably get it down to like 500, 400 right now. Just you have to like ask around. This is not like a flourishing consumer market right now, so it's really a situation where you can work angles and get deals.
Why is it not a flourishing consumer market, do you think?
In the United States, it's partly like fear of genetics because fear of insurance still. That's a lot of it. Privacy fears are a lot of it, and also like right now, it's not actionable for a lot of people on the consumer level. Like maybe about 10% of people, it's actionable. You get something out of it immediately. I think like the big benefits would be insurance companies. If there's national insurance, like in England, like the NHS, I think these sorts of situations, they're going to start sequencing people ahead of time. So to give you a concrete example, idiopathic illnesses of like, neonates, like just babies that are born. If they have an illness, what they've started to do is they realize, oh, if they just sequence immediately, something like 30% of the time or 40% of the time, they can actually diagnose, because the neonate can tell you what their problems is. They're not flourishing, they're not thriving. You can like run a bunch of tests, but it can be inconclusive. And so they've started to realize if you just do aggressive sequencing of any infant that's not thriving, or that seems to be ill in some way, you can actually like figure out in a substantial minority of cases what their illness is, right?
Interesting.
I can see that just being like National Health Service in Britain's like, okay, it's opt out. We're just gonna sequence all the infants, and if there's any problem that pops up, we're gonna do a scan to see if there's a major issue.
Cool. Yeah. And what about things like 23andMe? Are those worth it, or are those hype, or how do you see those?
I think 23andMe, I mean, again, it's opportunity cost. Like, the ancestry version is $99. The health version is $199. I mean, for me, like, for example, I was buying 23andMe. Like, I bought like, how much did I spend? I probably spent like $3,000 or $4,000 on 23andMe back when it was like $300, $400 a kit.
Oh, wow.
Back like, in 2010,
Interesting.
I had the money. I mean, I wasn't a rich person, but I was doing okay. I didn't have kids, whatever. I could, spend the money. I'm not sure if I would, I'd be more careful about like forking out like $300 on something like that now. Even if like the technology was like 2010 technology, because I have 3 kids, and like there's things I might not want to get then. But basically, like if you're upper middle class, like I think it's totally fine to do that. Basically, I mean, you can go out and like have like a fancy dinner for $100. So your genotype never depreciates. You might not visit it for years, but then all of a sudden something happens.
Now, let's say you're someone like me who's like, I'm not a geneticist, but
sorry for you, man. Sorry for you.
Well, I'm good with computers, and I know a little bit of programming, and I can do some pretty sophisticated statistical analysis, and I'm good at teaching myself new statistical analyses. I'm just curious, how hard is it to get the raw genome data and actually learn your way through analyzing it?
So the genotype data from 23andMe is relatively easy. It's just a text file that's very straightforward, and it would be trivial for you to figure out how to use that.
But I can't imagine they give you very raw data.
Well, they do give you, because they're only 630,000 positions.
Oh, so they do give you like a kind of raw like spreadsheet or something?
It's not a spreadsheet. It's a text file.
Okay.
It's a text file with like columns, and it's row column.
Okay.
It's a matrix format, right?
Okay. And what about, because we started the conversation talking about, you were saying, for somewhere between 500 and 1,000, you can get the full sequencing. Is that the right way to call it?
Yeah. And so let me clarify, because the media gets this confused.
Yeah, good.
The media gets this confused a lot. Sequencing is basically like the maximum amount of information. So your genome is the haploid, like not the diploid, because you have 2 copies of everything. So a single copy is 3 billion. There's 3 billion letters of A, C, T, and G. Okay, that's what it literally is. So it's like, it's like a 3 gigabyte file.
Okay.
In raw text, because I think each letter turns anyway. So 3 billion. Most of that does not vary very much between humans. So it's redundant information. So like this is a situation where like some sort of compression algorithm would work, right? What you're curious about is stuff that's varying between populations. Okay, those are polymorphisms. You have certain cutoff, like 1% of it is like different, whatever. There's different levels of ways to measure the polymorphism, but basically, depending on how you count it, there's about like 100 million polymorphisms variants within this 3 billion. Okay. Now, those 100 million are not equally informative. There's some polymorphisms that are varying across a lot of populations. There's some polymorphisms that are like only in one population. And there's some polymorphisms that are low frequency in terms of like, it's 99% one version, 1% the other, and other polymorphisms that are like 70-30. Okay. So when 23andMe gets it down to 630,000, one thing that it's doing is it's maximizing informative polymorphisms that have variation in populations that it's interested in. Which means Europeans. So traditionally, these SNP marker arrays have been geared towards European population genetic variation, because that's your target audience. They're improving that and they're changing that now. But that's what they're really targeting, and only about like a percent or so of the genome is actually coding for genes. And so those are called genic positions, exonic positions that are translated into proteins. So I think last I read, 90% of Mendelian diseases, so these are like the classical diseases you inherit recessively and stuff, those are found in exonic positions in about like 1% of the genome, right? And so if you're going to create like a chip, and so this is a technology where it's a literal chip where it has like 1 million positions max, something like that. I think the new chips have like 2 or 3 million, but in any case, this is a tiny subset of the variation in your in like the population's genome. What they're going to do is they're going to target common diseases because they want to check for those, and they're going to they're going to like sample variation across the genome so that they get a good representation. You don't need that many variant positions to do ancestry work. Okay. So for example, like, depending on like what you want to do, anywhere from like 10 to 100,000 is good enough for a lot of work. And then up above like 500,000 is probably overkill for most of what people would want of markers, right? Now, like I said, all of these marker positions are going to be enriched for like certain diseases. So the beauty of sequencing is we don't have to have this discussion. You just get all the data.
Right.
And if you want to like subset some of it, you can subset it. The crappy stuff is my programs that I had written to like process text files, they do not work as well when you have gigabyte size files.
Right.
So all of a sudden, like data manipulation starts to get to be a serious issue with these massive sequences.
Okay, fascinating. I don't know if you're watching the chat, but we just got a super chat question from Mark.
Ooh, a super chat.
Yep, for $5. That's a strong desire for the answer to this question. This is for you, Razib.
Ashkenazi.
Oh, you're reading it.
I'm reading it.
Let me read it out loud for anyone who's not watching the chat. Mark asks, if my partner is having IVF, would you recommend we get Ashkenazi sperm instead of mine? Parentheses, white Australian, comma, don't know my ancestry.
Dude, I don't know anything about your life situation, bro. So, I'm 5'8", so I'm not the tallest guy. My wife is quite tall, actually. We're similar height, but so I mean, height is a big deal. And people would want to select for that, but like, I'm not like gonna give up my right to my, you know what I'm saying? So, I don't understand why. I mean, why would you want? Like, what is the reason? I mean, I don't really understand. Like, you want them to like, go to Israel and dress up like a Hasidic Jew, and they'll make it a little more authentic. I don't know. Like, they're 50% Ashkenazi. I don't. I mean, no. Unless you give me like an actionable reason. I mean, if you are like convinced that that Jewish humor is heritable and you really prize that.
I guess the only reason would be if you want to maximize Ashkenazi traits. I guess Mark is imagining intelligence. So maybe a more general way to interpret the question that might be of more general interest beyond Mark would be maybe how do you think about people who want to optimize for intelligence or optimize perhaps for other traits? Like, how do you see that?
There is an easy way to optimize for intelligence. Find an intelligent mate.
Well, that's actually not easy though, is it? If you're, depending on who you are.
Yeah, well, if you're not intelligent, I'm sorry. No. Yeah, I mean, the way you optimize though is like, you don't have to like filter by ethnicity. Like you just like you want to select for the trait. Like this is what like classical breeders did. So I mean, when you go to a sperm bank, a good sperm bank should have validated, the SAT score, the GRE, or their educational qualifications. So I mean, my understanding from what I have read, and I have not read much of it because I don't need to go to a sperm bank. Is that, if you are a tall, blonde doctor that's athletic, you have super sperm. And I mean, it's like the other guys' sperms are in the sperm bank just so that they can say they have some choice, like your sperm is going to get selected. So, I mean, when people go to sperm banks, some single women, but a lot of lesbians too. And I'm assuming I think the dynamics are a little different when the husband is infertile, basically, when his sperm doesn't work. But in any case, they're very, very careful about what they select for, and they select for the smartest, tallest, most powerful individual. So that's basically what I would say. Like, if you think your sperm is not up to snuff, then just go to a bank and like buy the best.
And when you do that, you can just say what you want to optimize for.
In the US, you can. I mean, it depends. Like there are fly-by-night operations. There's really good ones, so you just have to be careful. I don't know how it works in other countries. I know Denmark is a big exporter of sperm because they have really liberal laws about that, and a lot of people want white children.
A lot of non-white people want white children.
Well, I guess both. Turkey had to ban it.
They had to ban white children.
No, they had to ban Danish sperm imports.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I never heard about that.
I'm just saying, like, if you're a white woman, you don't want a mixed race child usually, right? So you want to get, and if you're gonna have like a white child, you might as well have like a Nordic one. That's my assumption. I'm not a woman,
Interesting. Okay. Well, thanks for the question, Mark. That was an interesting, stimulating question. What were we? Well, okay. How about this, Razib? What about sort of consumer level genetic manipulation? Like how far are we from that, or what's the state of play with being able to actually manipulate your child before it's born?
Well, so I mean, manipulate, you mean genetic engineering. I don't think that's going to happen for anything that's not disease related for about a generation. So I think we can kick that ball down the curve. But when it comes to pre-implantation genetic diagnosis and screening, we're almost there. Like, as some of your listeners probably know, how many listeners do we got? Like, how many people are chatting and stuff?
Right now, we got 60 people watching.
Okay. So anyway, I just want to get a sense. But there's a company called Genomic Prediction that's based out of New Jersey, and they are starting to come online with consumer-oriented products through fertility clinics where you take a range of eggs. So you know that like the eggs, basically these fertilized eggs that, ova, I guess, that you produce by that stage, or zygotes, they exhibit a range of outcomes. So like, I have like my children range in height. I mean, they're young, so you say length from say like the 15th percentile to the 15th percentile in both directions, right? Okay. But they're genetically siblings, But I mean, the way that we were talking about genetics works as a discrete process with the sampling, you're going to get a huge range, and a lot of that is genetically controlled, especially with something like height. Mm-hmm. And so, like, say you want taller children, especially taller sons, you can select from your own output, right? I mean, that's going to be something that people are going to be doing in the next couple of years, especially wealthier people.
You're talking about embryo selection.
Yeah, basically. I don't think they're at embryo stage. It'll be zygote, but in any case, okay. Yeah, it'll be a more zygotic stage, right? And so, like, let's say you're a rich person and you're really smart, and you're a prodigy, and you want your zygote to be a prodigy, well, you want to get like a polygenic risk score that's like way out of control compared to all the other characteristics that you have in your egg. I think that's what they're thinking. But I mean, I think the number one thing that it's going to be used for is like more disease screening right now. But there's going to be rich people who have the money, who have the time, who want to create a better them.
But okay, so currently though, there's not consumer embryo selection going on in the U.S., right?
I mean, not officially. I mean, in a way, like when you're doing the test the non-invasive prenatal test for Down syndrome, that is embryo selection. It's fetal selection, right?
Oh, okay.
I mean, like every woman that's above the age of 35 now that gets pregnant, they're offered that through insurance.
Interesting.
And
Right.
most of the positive results in the United States, 70% last I checked, are terminated. Those pregnancies in the second trimester.
Wow.
So,
So do you see that becoming? Do you see consumers having way more options over the next few years? Do you see that kind of exploding in the popularity and the power of that, or is
I
it gonna be
do,
much
I do,
slower?
I do. I think consumers are going to do a lot more screening for like disease stuff in particular, but a lot of it will be driven by China, I think, or like East Asian countries where their fertility is low, so they're really particular, and they don't have some of the pro-life type activists going on, those sorts of ethical complaints, concerns in society. So I think we have to look at it from more than just an American perspective. I know you're in Britain, but you're still like son of the greatest country in the world, for
No, dude,
now.
I'm Cherokee, bro.
Oh, are you, dude?
I'm just kidding.
Do not even go there after today,
No,
right?
not at all. I'm
Oh
just kidding.
man, it was just like
I mean, you never
but
know, but yeah.
yeah, you never know. But yeah, so I think a lot of this stuff in the genetic space is going to get driven by international demand and concerns, and we are probably going to be a little bit left behind just because we're a little worried. I mean, we're not even adopting sequencing partly because people are scared about insurance. Like we have like too complex and just organically overgrown of a market and an ecosystem for something like this to disrupt.
And when you say people are afraid of insurance, you mean that they are afraid they're going to get identified as having an expensive condition, then they're not going to be able to afford the cost of insurance.
Yeah, like premium. I mean, I think like technically you're not supposed to increase premiums and stuff that way anymore, but people are still paranoid, and who knows? Like the Republicans might, kick Obamacare to the curb. It's not implausible. All
Right.
of a sudden, you've just like given insurance the fact that you probably are going to die of cancer in your 60s at a given percentage, and
Right.
you're 52.
Right. Okay. What do you make of all of the kind of political hysteria around genetic differences among groups?
You can get me in trouble, bro. I think it's definitely the situation has gotten a lot worse in the last 10 years
The
since I've been
hysteria?
working. Oh yeah, it's way in the United States way worse.
Hmm.
So I think like if there's going to be any discussion and exploration of this topic, it's going to happen on the down low, which it already is in some ways, and it'll happen outside the United States. It won't happen in the United States because we can't even talk about sex differences anymore.
Right.
You can, I mean, you get in trouble for talking about sex differences now. We're going backwards on this issue. So this is my perception.
So is your larger view of the international politics of it then kind of similar to what you were saying with the genetic engineering, that the US and maybe the West in particular as a whole is going to become kind of more and more just a backwater, like politically and intellectually, around genetics and its conversation around genetics, but also its engineering of genetics, and the rest of the world, in particular China, is just going to shoot way past us?
Yeah, India too. I think there's a shadow that haunts us, and that's the shadow of World War II, and also the shadow of eugenics. And I say like 15 years ago, I was a little more optimistic that we'd go beyond that because there are a lot of things that are happening on the consumer side. Say like non-invasive prenatal testing, in vitro. There's a lot of little things that are happening on the margins that people just take for granted. But yeah, I don't think that basically our society is not designed for talking about that sort of thing, and so people won't.
Mhm.
They respond to incentives, so they won't. The people in East Asia, from what I've heard and seen, they don't have those sorts of taboos. They don't have that history. They don't have the right racial dynamics and societies. And Indians are also very similar. They don't have the same sort of history, so they will
Right.
talk about it.
Do you know much about kind of DIY, kind of black market genetic hacking type groups or tendencies? I mean,
I used to be into the DIY. Like when I lived in the Bay Area, I used to be kind of hooked into them. It's cool. I mean, the hacking. I mean, it's dangerous, but there's some supplements that are dangerous.
mhm.
So I try to always like caution. I try to calm down my concern because, well, compare it to something else, right? So supplementation is relatively unregulated, you know, and
Mhm.
people can like load up on supplements. So why can't they do this DIY stuff? Yeah, some of them will die, but you know, if you don't have a family, if you don't have children, I mean, you only live once, and like, you know, there's a reason that men in particular have a high mortality, and there are like more women by the 30s, you know, because
Mhm.
there are more males that are born than females, and then around 28, all of a sudden there's a surplus of females, and it's because we killed ourselves off. We had like you know, sex-linked diseases. Basically, I'm pretty libertarian about that. It just needs to be open about what they're doing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and the only thing that I would be worried about is like, you know, obviously you can't like experiment with stuff that has contagious aspects, you know.
Right.
But if you
Right.
want to like inject yourself with stuff, I'm not sure if it's prudent for society to encourage this through mass-produced kits,
Hmm.
you know. But some people will probably do it, you know. Self-experimentation is a thing, and
Right.
there's always going to be a niche.
I just wonder if in some weird way the hysterical political correctness of the US maybe in some ways would incentivize a more robust and active kind of DIY culture of kind of crypto anarchist libertarian experimentation around these things. But
I
I don't
mean,
know.
there are people who are like that, but like you said, it is crypto. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, a lot of views, a lot of perspectives that are, you know, hidden now in American society. Um, I mean, let me give you a concrete example that you might find interesting and maybe not
Yeah.
aware of. You know, I am, you know, I'm from uh, my family's from a Muslim background, but I'm atheist, and I'm pretty like skeptical of Islam, but whatever.
Hmm.
You know, I have like, you know, I have brown friends who are, you know, who are like, you know, brown American, like Indian American, like, you know, your stereotypical super progressive, hyper educated, upper middle class, South Asian American. And, you know, they're all about like white supremacy, and they hate Islamophobia and stuff like that. But, you know, privately, things can be a little different. So, you know, they'll be like, yeah, Islam's a fucked up religion. I mean, it's just like fucked up, you know? And I'm like, yeah, but like you fucking hate Islamophobes. You're like, yeah, well, you know, I mean, you can't really say that. And like, I'm against prejudice, but I'm just saying it's a fucked up religion, you know? I mean, they're not stupid. Like, they know
Yeah.
all the problems with Islam, and they know that it's not like the most feminist religion or whatever the hell
They're
people
just
say.
signaling otherwise.
Well, yeah, but they know, and like, you know, white people have no idea. Like, maybe white liberals are that stupid. So, I mean, you know, I mean, honestly, I don't know. Like, I'll give you another example. Like, I had a friend, you know, a geneticist friend, and I mean, this is I said this on like the I think this was edited out. I said this on the Urbane Cowboys podcast, but he apparently progressives are super against Hindu nationalism now. There's like some reason. It's a thing, okay? And Hindu nationalists are pretty Islamophobic in like a coarse way. I mean, they are. That's just how they are. Okay. And he said something about like, I wonder what the Muslim students on campus feel when they see there's a like a Hindu meeting or a Hindu nationalist meeting. And I was just like, I'm like, bro, you're so dumb. Muslim students don't give a shit unless they're Pakistani, because Arabs don't give a shit about brown people. You know, like basically, like white liberals have an idea that Muslims have this brown people solidarity. Arabs are racist as fuck. Okay, they
Okay.
think brown people are oily and dirty. Okay, they don't give
Interesting.
a shit about Kashmir. Like they might say a few things, but they're not going to go to a protest about Kashmir. They can't find it on the map. You know,
So
like
wait, real quick, it's kind of interesting that you're distinguishing between Arabs and brown people because I think a lot of white Westerners would see Arabs as
that's
brown.
that's because we all look the same to you. You know?
I'm just saying what a lot of white people would kind of think.
Yeah. But like if you look at like the Arab terrorists that are Arab terrorists in Hollywood, look at their names. They're Indian, because real Arabs don't look brown enough for you guys.
Ah, okay.
They look a little too much like you. Like, look at your fucking beard, dude. You know? No, I'm serious. Like, if you look
No,
at the
I
two
hear
of
you.
us,
Yeah.
you look more like an Arab than I do, objectively. You know?
I know what you
But
mean.
like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you consider Arab brown, and so you have to like, you you have to like act to portray very light brown people, but they got to be a little browner because like otherwise they look a little too much like you. You
That's a
know?
really interesting point. Yeah, I never really thought about that.
Well, I mean, like you don't think of Ralph Nader as like non-white like politician that ran in 2000. He's Lebanese, you know.
How much Lebanese?
He's all Lebanese.
Really?
Yes, exactly. Really, of course
I
you
had
don't.
no
Really.
idea.
Yeah, well, you don't. Or it's like the singer Tiffany is half Lebanese. Her last name is Darwish. You know.
Yeah, no,
So
it's a
there's
good point. Now that I think about it, when I rack my brain for all of the Arab people I know, yeah, they're you're right. They're much lighter skinned that than what a lot of people would think of when they think of a brown person.
Yeah, well, they're not. I mean, some of them are brownish. A lot of them
Right.
that are
Some
brownish,
are. Yeah.
they have African ancestry though, and so they're very distinct looking. They don't look South Asian.
Right. Okay.
An Arab as brown skinned as me has curly hair and has obvious African ancestry. I've never met an Arab as brown as me that doesn't have African ancestry. You know, like they're Sudanese or Yemeni or something like that.
Right. Interesting.
So,
Anyway, your larger point was that Arabs don't care about like racism.
well, I mean, no, they're kind of against racism, especially when white people do it. You know,
But
but
you were saying that within India, or what were you referring to?
just like traditionally, I mean, like Indian workers or Filipino workers, or like black workers that go to work in the Gulf, like they know what they're going to experience. It's called Jim Crow. It's just like in Arabic or something. Like I've
Right.
been to the Gulf, I've seen it. Like it's a caste society in a very literal way. So it's like a dystopian, like techno dystopian future. You know, it might be our own future, but I don't know. So it's like everyone knows their place in the Gulf. You know,
Right.
the Arabs are like kind of like the Trustafarians, the ruling class, and then you have some like skilled workers, often European, sometimes South Asian, doing things, and then you have the like the servant class of South Asians that do most of the work, right? And so
This
you
is
have
it.
to,
You're saying in the Gulf, you're saying.
yeah.
Right. Have you spent much time there?
No, but I've gone there for business, and I've had relatives. Going to the Gulf if you're Bangladeshi is a very good way to turn you into an atheist.
Oh yeah. Why is that?
Yeah, or they just see like how disgusting Arabs are, in terms of just like they're not like Muslims from outside the Arab world. I think do perceive Arabs as being a holy people because that's the language of God.
Hmm.
But then you go to the Arab world and you see how they're behaving, or you live in Saudi Arabia and you see how people behave in Saudi Arabia, the debauchery, the hypocrisy.
Right. Okay.
And
Right.
so you start to realize, like, wait, why is this supposed to be such a holy religion? When these people are so unholy. That's what I've seen. It hasn't happened to me. I was always an atheist. But,
Now,
it just,
in the Gulf, I mean, there's like straight up slavery, right?
they officially, I think slave trading officially stopped in the 70s.
Oh, okay.
I think the last open air slave markets were shut down in the 70s. But they have de facto slavery in terms of like, okay, like they confiscate your passport. You don't make enough money that you can go back. I would say it's more like indentured servitude. So it's not chattel slavery. Like you still have some human rights, right? So let's distinguish between chattel slavery, where okay, like Arabs used to, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they used to do a little thing where they would kidnap and enslave black people making the Hajj, and that's chattel slavery, right? And then they have like ownership of you, and if you're a woman, they can turn you into a sex slave. I don't think that's too common, but I mean, it's like indentured servitude, so you're more like a serf, right? You have some rights as a human being, but you are someone's property in some functional way.
Right. Right. Yeah. I don't know much about the Gulf at all. I haven't been there, and I've only read somewhat, but I've read a little bit about that. It
Oh,
sounds
it's fun. It's really fun. Just
fun to
don't
read
be.
about, not to live there. It
Oh
sounds like.
no! I mean, no. You'd be fine. You're a white guy.
Yeah.
Like they really like white people because they think you're competent. I mean, they're never gonna like give you the same rights, but that's fine. You don't have to work that hard, and you make a lot of money. It's really hot, and like you can't go to the. I don't know. Like, I mean, there's some things like depending on like Dubai, you can drink. In Qatar, you can drink. Kuwait, you can't drink. I think, at least in like bars and stuff like that. So all I'm saying is like you can make a good life there for you, even if the majority of people are like subject to like deep immiseration. But that's not you.
And what about like a high skilled Southeast Asian person such as yourself?
Yeah, generally it's fine. I mean, we're not like we're lower down on the pecking order than the white people, obviously, but
You could go there just fine, and you do well there, and
yeah, I mean,
you don't have problems there, like racial problems there, do you?
uh, I mean, I didn't. I think it's a little different also because my family's Muslim. Muslims tend to have more equal rights compared to like Hindus or Christians. Officially, they tend to be a little less abusive towards their Muslim servants.
Okay.
I mean, that's just true because
Okay.
they're just like, oh, it's Muslim. You can't like beat them and abuse them as much.
Interesting.
I mean, I talked to a Saudi guy once where his family they specifically got Sri Lankan and Christian Filipino maids because they're not Muslim, so you can abuse them.
Wow. Huh.
So I mean, he was just honest about it.
Fascinating. So there's another question, another super track question here for $5 from Pelagius Lobo here. And the question is, it's a general question. What's your idea on how the Arabs fell from grace? Whatever that means.
It is probably, let me think. Well, I mean, so all societies go through phases of like social increased and decreased social cohesion. So it's like a great unwinding process, and then they can rewind, right? And so like the Arabs had a lot of social cohesion for a couple of centuries there. And what happened in the 9th century specifically is they started utilizing slave soldiers from the Turkish lands. And basically at some point, those slave soldiers took over. And after that, the Arabs didn't have control over their own societies. Now, another issue is in the 8th century, and especially the 9th century, a lot of the action in Baghdad was actually driven by Persianate elites, especially from Eastern Persia. And there was a period in the early 9th century when they almost relocated the capital from Baghdad to Khorasan, which is like in the border between Afghanistan and Eastern Iran now. So they're going to like move the capital because that's where like the soldiers and the support of the current regime was. And so actually the Arab period was actually relatively short-lived when you're talking about like Arabs as Arabs from Arabia. Now, a lot of the people in Iraq and Syria became Arabicized over time, but that's kind of a different issue, right? So, I mean, I think like after about like the 900 AD, the Arabs lost control of their own destiny. The slave soldiers, the Turks took over. The Persians took over a lot of the aspects of culture, and they became marginalized in a lot of the societies that they notionally ran. In North Africa, slightly different situation. But the question was why or when? Was why, right?
Yeah.
Like, I see it as a natural process of to some extent there's a natural process of decay, right? Like to the classical Greeks, compare them to what the Greeks were in 100 AD under the Romans. I mean, they're okay, but I mean, 4th century Athens, what? You know, sometimes societies just explode and it's hard to like figure out what the causal connections are. And then all those things that you're juggling, like they're going to eventually unwind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's interesting. I don't know too much about the region or the time periods that you were referring to, so you definitely gave me something to think about and read about. Do you see the American empire at the current moment in a possible state of civilizational decline?
Yeah, I talk about it every day.
Yeah, I'm inclined to see it the same way too.
I mean, how old are you?
I'm 32. What about you?
I am 41.
Okay.
So I remember 1999. You know, I remember the 1990s. And like, yeah, our internet was slow, but we were awesome. You know, we were the only ones that had internet. You know, there were a couple.
Were you born and raised in the U.S.?
I was raised in the U.S. I wasn't born here. I was born in Bangladesh.
Cool.
So, you know, I remember the 80s and 90s, and it was great because, I mean, yeah, like we had some issues, but man, I mean, especially after Russia went down, China was still almost starving. The Indians were still doing their socialism. Like there was nobody else, you know, like we were number one by default, and we're still number one, but now it's a game, right? Like there's a game that's going on, and I think that's why Trump got elected, because I think on some level we understand that it's a game, and it's really uncomfortable, you know, because we've always been the best looking and the smartest in the school, and now there are these new kids, and yeah, they're not like quite up to par, but you can see how like something might happen, and we're not there anymore, you know. And so we still have like really high per capita. So I mean, my family's from Bangladesh, and I can tell you, we're just like, oh hell no, we're not going back. I mean, mostly, you know. My dad was a college professor in Bangladesh, so he had an okay job, you know. But he was just like, there's more opportunities for our kids in this country, so we stayed. And I still think, like, coming from Bangladesh to the United States is a good move. But I mean, I've had students that were interns that are from India, and I was like, oh, are you going to stay in the States? And they're like, no, I'm going back. 30 years ago, that would sound insane, Like, nobody does that back then. Like, people that like study from China and they go back. There are people who are expats whose parents worked in Hong Kong or Singapore, and they're American and they're white, and they're going to stay there because they're like, well, what are they going to do in America? I mean, yeah, you can have a good job in America, and you can have an okay living, and you can be middle to upper middle class, although it's a smaller and smaller fraction, to be honest. But I mean, like, aside from Elon Musk, who's looking at the stars? Like, where's our greatness? Like, the issue with the Chinese is, like, you talk to them and they know that, like, they done fucked up for a couple of centuries there, but like the dragon's awakening, and like, they know what they got cooking. Okay. I mean, it's like, it's really palpable when you talk to them that they see hope and they see the future on the horizon for them. And, talking to Americans of my generation, I'm like, do we see that? I mean, we go to Dubai, like, what do we see? We see the future, and it's kind of scary, and it's not like America, You go to China and, like, they have social credit, and, like, they're all busy, they're doing their thing. It's just, the world is much more diverse in a really deep way than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we had a singular vision. We don't have that anymore.
Well, I definitely agree with you that there's a deep problem of malaise. There's a kind of cultural malaise of some kind in the U.S. And yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I actually have not spent that much time in Asia, so I don't have the references that you have. So that's really interesting to hear that people from, whether it be China or India or wherever, don't even really look to wanting to stay here if they have the opportunity to.
Well, they vote with their feet.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, I mean, if you're from an economic perspective, like material conditions and stuff, I mean, they're showing you, like, what they think the future is going to be like, and where they think there's, like, a possibility, and, like, where there's activity and dynamism. I mean, you heard that joke about, like, the cultural revolutions come to the United States. I mean, like, a lot of Chinese people are like, you guys are crazy. We did this and it didn't work.
Right. Right. They have a word, right? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's like yeah. It's like white liberal. I mean, yeah, I just think we're going through a phase. It's not a nice phase. I think we're going to go further to the left in the early 2020s, and then eventually we're not going to have enough money, and you can only hate like the white supremacist, like, whatever superstructure so long. My assertion, which I've been kind of saying for about 10 years, is we're starting to get really obsessed with white supremacy in the United States, just as it's kind of over.
I mean, you can make a good case, I think, that the reason people are so sensitive to any little trace of possible white supremacy is precisely because white supremacy has been so effectively eradicated that we've become, if you think you even see a sliver of it, you freak the fuck out. And it's a testimony to how little there is.
I mean, I grew up in the 1980s, and, like, I mean, I have a problem with some of my liberal white friends talking about how racist everything is now because Trump was elected. I'm like, dude, it's just like, I've called sand nigger, like, all sorts of things. I mean, it's just like, I knew what the 80s were like. They were fine. I wasn't, like, traumatized or anything, but they were way more racist. Right. Every decade's been better. So, if you're a white person, you can, like, have your delusions because, like, I mean, unless you are racist yourself, and so second. Spam call. Cool. But anyway, yeah, I think, like, it's an interesting situation where it's like the in a way, like what I said on the Urbane Cowboys podcast, postmodernism is correct in a certain way that we can create our own reality if we want, up to a limit. And so that's what we're creating. Like, I talk to young kids today, and sometimes, we've had interns, and sometimes they, like, write copy for us and stuff, and they've interjected all this stuff about, like, white supremacy into, like, the 14th century. And I'm just like, that's bullshit. It's just like, it wasn't a thing then.
Yeah, I mean, the distinction between, like, white and black race wasn't even invented by then.
I mean, it was there, but it wasn't very salient in the same way, right?
You could say that, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't have the same meaning and the same, like, valence that it does today. So yeah, I mean, it's like basically our model for today does not work back then, you
Yeah.
know. But these students, they're taught in a way in undergraduate where that's like all they can like frame the world in. So it's basically like um, I love history. I love to read history. I like to know about things. But today, like they're brainwashing kids, and most of these kids don't care that much anyway. So that you give them a little bit of theory that's totally wrong. They're never going to check it, you know. But it's like it's a little annoying for me having to like re-educate people because I'm like, no, that's just like it's like you have a little bit of theory, but that's it. Like it's all wrong. Like that's not how it works, you know. But I think like that's why I don't know. That's why I'm like really frustrated with a lot of like the non-STEM areas of academia, you know. Maybe like outside of economics, philosophy, a few other areas like that.
Well, I think the kind of this kind of dominant leftist cultural politics that you're referring to is, I think it's kind of evolved to be the dominant framework, or it's kind of been selected because it's really easy and quick to assimilate. And I think, for like people who are pretty smart, but, not smart enough to like start a tech company or something like that, it's kind of like a good middle level kind of like cultural theory where
Mhm.
you can pick it up in grade school, and and like a humanities degree can give you like a pretty good, to the average student, you can get a pretty good kind of grounding in this like entire worldview that shows you're smart, that shows you're with it.
Mhm.
It's quick to assimilate, but it's complex and illogical enough that there's like an infinite upper bound on the mental gymnastics and acrobatics that one can use to display their sophistication.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty good at social justice ease because I have pretty good verbal skills.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
usually
Right.
know more than those people. So, yeah, I stopped doing. My wife insists I stop doing it on Twitter, but I still do it on Facebook occasionally, just because people don't realize that I'm joking. And it's really fun because it's easy to pawn people, but
No, I
it's
think that's
actually
exactly right though. I think it's a specialized niche for people who excel in kind of verbal fluidity to kind of like create their own empires, to kind of oppose or counter the empires of, let's say, like cold hard intelligence that you find in, like engineering or whatever.
yeah, and like it's really great when the best is like liberal white males. Oh, it's just so easy. It's just so great, and they like never tell you to stop. They're just like more and more. And then if I want a challenge, you go for white females because then they got the gender thing on you, as a brown guy. And so we're gonna see like this is kind of like an even playing field, and we'll see who's gonna win this, So it's a game. It's just a game.
Right. I think it's a virtue of the game that it's kind of unlimited. Like there is no like any I mean, I'm sure you are familiar with the idea of the explosion that arises in a system where any kind of contradiction is allowed in. Like once
Mhm.
if there's any illogic in a perspective or framework, then it's going to potentially be infinite or unlimited in the ways that you can just generate new implications.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of that contradictory kind of seed in there. And I think that's kind of what it is. I mean, it's like it doesn't really make sense from the bottom up. There's poor logic built in.
Mhm.
Therefore, it's kind of very desirably infinite. Like there's often no way to put a cap on it. There's no way to
Yeah,
resolve a debate. But that's
it's
kind
not
of a virtue if
it's
that's
it's
if
not
that's the kind of
coherent or
game you're playing.
it's not coherent or contingent. So I had a friend. The latest, I have a lot of correspondents in academia, mostly geneticists that are centrist, center left type people that are kind of frustrated by the very far left. And
Mm.
he was asking me about like someone was saying like, well, you need to read critical theory, and I'm just like, bro, you're an atheist, right? And I'm like, yeah. Or he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, I mean, have you read a bunch of theology? I mean, that's basically the same. Now, I have read some critical theory, and I actually have read a fair amount of theology because I'm just weirdly interested in that. I still think it's word games, and it's more about like intellectual history that I'm reading it for. But really, they're very similar to me.
Mhm.
Like yeah, like maybe Alvin Plantinga does like modal logic. He reads some Norman Malcolm. Okay, that stuff is like really awesome in terms of their logical abilities. But most of like the middle brow theology is like okay, like whatever. Like if you didn't believe this stuff ahead of time, this is nonsense. You know, a
Uh-huh.
lot of the critical theory, the more ambitious critical theory is like that. It's nonsense. Now, the more less ambitious, the more modest critical theory actually does have some roles to play in critique. Like, it's just it went out of control. Like you can't basically my idea with social issues, with social phenomena, is you should be theory poor and data rich. I'm not saying go all the way towards like thick description, like these cultural anthropology people that refuse to make any generalizations, but you can't go super heavy on theory because we don't know enough, right? But theory is easy. You know, Pascal Boyer says theory is information for free. Like, you know, so like these kids that are learning theories about colonialism, they apply it to the 13th century or they apply it to ancient Greece. What? You know, I mean, that's not even wrong. It's not even wrong.
Right.
But,
Right.
you know, it's very frustrating to like live in a world where, you know, I was, when I was a little kid, I'd read like big thick books on history because I'm just curious. And like now I meet like people that have graduate educations and I think that they know less than I did of facts as a 6-year-old. They don't read any facts.
Well, you can definitely get a PhD nowadays without studying any facts. I mean, there are whole programs where you can do that.
Yeah.
Razib, you're a smart, busy man. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I feel like we've done more than an hour now. So,
All right.
I mean, I'm enjoying very much talking with you, but I don't want to keep you. Was there anything else on your mind today that you wanted to, you're just dying to share with the world?
So I was actually curious, like, what's up with you? Like, so I know that a friend of mine, Professor Booty, was like tweeting at you, and he's like, you know, what's your deal? Like, you know, like what are you doing on the interwebs right now? Like, what are you doing on Twitter? Like, you know, what I don't know, because you followed me, I followed you back. You like have some interesting interviews, but like, are you being very experimental right now and just trying to figure it out?
Oh yeah, very experimental, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
That's my
yeah, I think I think that people who are very smart today, who occupy positions of any amount of prestige or respectability, are almost across the board kind of asphyxiated by you know, how they're perceived by social expectations, just a kind of expectation of a certain kind of seriousness. And I just think it's really, really constraining and really bad for everyone. And you know, I don't see myself as doing something like really noble or heroic, but just because of how I am temperamentally constituted,
Yeah.
I personally find kind of the mold of being like a very serious, prestigious professor. I find it very oppressive personally, and so I'm kind of using myself a little bit to I'm kind of sacrificing myself a little bit. I don't want it to sound too like religious or heroic or anything like that, because it's not. I'm not thinking about it that way.
Yeah.
But I'm basically my view is kind of like, you know, I worked hard to get a platform as a kind of respectable academic and to have a you know, an audience and everything. But I find it so like the expectations to live up to a certain image, I actually find like it actually makes it impossible for me to think the best things I'm able to think. And so I need as a kind of existential necessity for myself to purposely kind of shit on my own image and public perception to free me up to just feel free, basically. And so I do a lot of silly stuff. I do a lot of weird stuff. I do a lot of stuff that I'm sure to like an average person expecting like professorial behavior. A lot of the stuff I do just is at best incomprehensible and often like actively stupid or even reprehensible. But to me, it's like I don't know, I need like a certain right to be stupid sometimes or even be reprehensible sometimes. And I feel like a lot of people, like not just me, but a lot of people at my kind of level of whatever, like institutionalized like respectability or whatever, like the world would be a much, much, much better place if everyone who had a kind of like prestigious position could be a little bit more relaxed on these fronts. And because I'm temperamentally well suited to doing it, I'm just kind of like trying to fuck shit up, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that was my perception, and you know, I have a lot of friends who are academics who are different privately than they are publicly because you have to put in a certain face, you know, a certain kind of like appearance of, you know, you're saying respectability, but it's just like you have to be a very serious person because you have a very serious degree and a very serious department with very serious department chairs. and very serious emeritus colleagues. You
Hmm.
know? And so I find it quite amusing because I'm not a very serious person. I'm just interested in what I'm interested in, you
Yeah.
know. And so I don't try to put a fun. I did see like someone keeps asking a question about my opinion of Steve Saylor and J.F. Girapi.
Oh, go
So
off on whatever you want. Yeah.
yeah, I'll answer that because I think he kept asking. Um,
Yeah, sure.
uh, anyway, Steve, I've known for like I don't know, like almost 20 years now, I guess, on and off through the internet. I agree with some of his stuff. I don't agree with some of his stuff. So I mean, that's about. I mean, really, I don't know what else to say. I mean, he's a fine person. We haven't been in his touch more, as recently. I've been busy, like starting a family and stuff. But that's the thing with Steve. I follow his blog or his Twitter every now and then. And then JF, yeah, the other guy, JF. I have seen him on YouTube recommended, I think, before. And somebody else, a friend of mine, asked me what I thought of him. I don't know what to think of him. I think he's a neuroscientist, right? But I don't think he talks too much about science. He's more alt right. I don't know. I don't have like very strong thoughts about it because I don't watch his stuff. Yeah, I watched one of his things like a while ago because a friend of mine said, "Do you think this guy is legit?" And um, I'm not super interested in listening to scientists talk on YouTube because I'd rather read a paper. And so it's nothing against that guy. I don't know what he's talking about because like I mean I don't know how I mean if you're in a field, if you're in an academic field, you want to read the paper and get into supplements. That's how you engage it. You don't engage it by watching a YouTube. And so it's really difficult for me to do that. I actually do get asked fairly frequently to watch science related YouTubes related to genetics because my friends are like, oh, and these are younger friends. They're like, oh, what do you think about this? And I'm just like, dude, this is just stupid. First of all, it's usually stupid, like literally, like they don't know what they're talking about. But second, just like me watching a YouTube on science when I could be like doing data analysis or like a formula. That's what I like to do. And so I don't have like a strong opinion about this JF Garepi guy, partly because he's a YouTuber. Maybe if he was a blogger, it'd be different. I'm a
Yeah.
blogger. I'll read people, but I don't want to watch them talk about science and biology because I know enough about that.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's definitely a certain real science you kind of can't really adjudicate in like video format. You want to read papers. That makes sense to me. In fact, listening to you just now, you kind of reminded me of something else I could say to you about what I'm currently doing, because I mean, I was just reflecting on how my answer to you was really quite vague and diffuse, and it's in large part because what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what I'm doing, and I shouldn't pretend to know exactly what I'm doing. The in some sense, like the basic way to describe it with epistemological modesty is that I was successful in pursuing an academic career, and I landed in a kind of tenured position as an academic at a good university. And it's just not what I thought it would be. It's not what I wanted out of life. It's not what I imagined academia would be like. And it's not, yeah. And I'm actually very temperamentally mismatched, I think, with academia. It's not at all my vision of what the intellectual life should be. And so I'm just basically grasping at straws for like any other way of doing it. I'm looking at other possibilities, other options, other ways of doing it. And what you were just making me think about when you were talking about YouTube is I have this hypothesis right now that, it's always been the case throughout history that intellectuals, people who want to give most of their life's effort to just, seeking some sort of truth for the sake of truth itself, have to kind of like pay their way through life through some sort of auxiliary activity of some kind. So historically, teaching has been a very common activity associated with the intellectual life, or like maybe, yeah, teaching has been one of the most common. And, that gives rise to our image of the academic as basically half teacher, half original research or whatever. But it seems to me that now what you're really looking at is a lot of academics nowadays, half of their job is bureaucracy, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like what they're actually doing to pay the bills
Yep.
is they're helping run, they're pushing around paper for large higher education institutions, and that's what they get paid to do. And then, on the side, they get to do their research and they can beg for grant money from, institutional funding bodies that basically force them to do more paperwork to pay their way through it. And so it's like, the way I see it is right now, the dominant model of being an intellectual through being an academic is you pay your way through bureaucracy, basically, and an increasingly large load of bureaucracy in terms of the whole portfolio of your efforts. But it seems to me that there is an alternative model, and I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if it's there yet, but it looks like it might be. And this is what I'm experimenting with is I think you might be able to do a model where instead of you paying your way through bureaucracy, you pay your way through something more like entertainment. And that sounds kind of vulgar. Like I don't want to be like a vaudeville performer or something like that. And I don't especially want to be like like vulgar YouTube personality type of thing. But maybe there's a new form. Maybe there's something that I could create more organically and authentically where I put half of my labor into doing things on the internet that other people find fun or, pleasing, or that they identify with emotionally, or whatever the case might be. Like that's all entertainment. But maybe I can do it in like a more high level intellectual way that's actually complementary with novel original research. So like what I'm really trying to drive to, and I'm sure people who watch me on the internet would never be able to guess this. Like I think a lot of people think I'm just like a publicity hound or I'm just like a bullshitter or something like that. But what I'm really trying to push towards, it maybe it exists, is I do half of my, I spend half of my work hours each day doing my novel advanced social science research, and then I spend the other half doing stuff that's public facing, and it's fun and it's creative and it's weird and I experiment and people find it entertaining, and people might be willing to pay in some way for that sort of thing over time. To me, I'm temperamentally more suited to entertaining than I am to bureaucracy. So if I have to pay the bills through some sort of non-intellectual kind of auxiliary activity, I wonder if I could do it through some sort of entertainment function. That's one of my hypotheses.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the issues in natural sciences is you need a lot of labor. In the social sciences where you can do your own data analysis is a little different, right?
Exactly. I don't need a lab. I don't need big grants. I have a bunch of free, big public data sets that I could spend the rest of my life picking apart and analyzing and learning from and figuring out the knowledge that I want to figure out. I don't really need permission. I don't need more money. I just need time is what I need. And so you're absolutely right to point out that's part of my larger strategic reflection on it.
I mean, some of the things that I do, I just like do because no one else is doing it. Like a lot of the things that I do, and I'm not monetarily compensated, but I feel like I have to do it. Someone just asked. I'm actually like reading these now.
Sure.
Someone asked if I know Sean Last and the Alternative Hypothesis blog. No, I don't really know them too well. I know they've cited me, so I know a lot of these things that people mention, because my friends will be like, do you know this person cited you? Do you know who they are? And I'm like, I don't know who they are, And so I have like no problem with anybody on the YouTubes or whatever they're doing. But like I said, like I tend to engage the primary scientific literature because that's what I gain the most out of. I don't engage too much of derivative stuff because I'm already derivative, most of the stuff that I'm doing on the blog is derivative, right? And so I don't engage much with that anymore because I would rather engage with the primary literature in genetics is so active and so fertile and so fast moving right now. If you take your eye off it, I mean, it's actually been a problem for people that are writing books on it because, it could take like 6 months to write a book and then blah, blah, blah. And then like overnight, the book is out of date, So, when you're asking me, what do I think of Khan Academy? I think it's fine. It's kind of annoying that we have the same last name and he's also Bengali. I don't know. But I mean, it's cool. I don't have a problem with it. I like the idea. I like the idea of self-learning. I'm a self-learning person. I don't learn the same way as other people. I want my kids to self-learn. So for me, it's like, when I'm listening to you and talking, it's like, we just have to reflect on like, what is the life of the mind? And we shouldn't always just take for granted the way things are, because that's not the way that things have always been. So you're talking about how traditionally intellectuals have been teachers. That's true too. But like Leibniz was a functionary. Spinoza was like a glassmaker.
That's right. Yeah.
There are different ways you can do it, and you might have another job, and this might be an avocation, and that's the way it was for a long time. The music industry has gone through a lot of changes recently. with free music, and that's having a lot of effects. But it also means that a lot of people are having to do things more outside of the system, And so I think we do need to. We have a lot of data resources out there. I'm disappointed with how little the public is actually engaging with the data and like downloading R. Doing the old one thing that I've tried to do on my blog for years is do general social science analysis, because I want pundits on the internet to start doing that. I haven't really convinced anybody that's a big pundit, and like a lot of them have cited me and read me. They know, they just can't be bothered to actually do the data analysis before they open their mouth. It's really annoying to me,
Right, but that's a niche. I mean, that's a market opportunity. I mean, because I think you're exactly right, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm good at, and I've had some success doing kind of data blogging, and so that would be like one type of thing I would like to do much more of, precisely because I think you're right. Like people don't do it enough.
Yeah. Someone's asking about epigenetics. I got to answer this one.
Sure.
I have a lot of friends who work in that area. It's a really hot area. It's a really big deal, but it's not as big of a deal as the press makes you think. Okay. If epigenetics was like overwhelming, was like going to overturn everything, we could never have done genetics in the first place. Like Mendelian genetics would not have worked. You wouldn't have been able to understand how the transmission worked if epigenetics was way more important. Epigenetics is important. It does have an effect on the margin, and there's going to be a lot of resources devoted to it because it affects some diseases and it has some marginal effects that are important. But just don't buy the hype. It's important. It's real. It's not fake, but it's not revolutionary. It's evolutionary. Anyways, we should probably time this out. It was great talking to you, man.
Yeah, man, it was really good to chat with you.
Yeah. Later, guys. So I guess I just disconnect.
Yeah, you can just nix your way out of it. No worries. Thanks again, man. I'll talk to you. I'll see you around the webs.
Yeah, later.
All right, see you, Razib. All right. That was cool. Smart dude. I don't know shit about genetics. I like being made to feel and remember how little I know about something. But yeah, I'm trying to think. That was good. I'll have to digest it. I think actually I decided last night after the live stream last night, when the person nixes the window and exits, I usually do this kind of I take a few minutes to give some parting words. But often at the end of these conversations, I'm so tired mentally that I'm just like struggling to complete sentences. So I'm thinking about maybe in the future, after the live stream guest leaves the window, I'll just also leave the window, and that'll be that. But then I feel bad leaving you folks like that, all abrupt. So I'll think about it. But Mark says that Razib is insanely smart. I agree. He was a very smart man. I've interacted with him a fair bit on the internet, but we never got to meet or talk. So that's one of the best things about this live stream is just like getting to actually get to know a little bit better people that I interact with, sometimes for long periods on Twitter and whatever. So yeah, it's always a pleasure to see what people are like, under the hood. What else? So I think thanks for the good questions, everyone. Active chat as always. Some interesting questions were asked. I'm glad that he was a good sport and he was reading the chat and taking some extra questions. I didn't want to drill him with like too many questions. That's why I wasn't asking him every question that you all were posting. But Sam says bring on some data bloggers. Yeah, I can think about some other data bloggers. What else? Oh, right. So for those of you who didn't hear at the beginning, before I leave you for the evening, I'll give you some news also about future guests that are coming up. So yeah, I'll tell you some future guests. I actually just got a new one confirmed today. We're going to do another live stream tomorrow, actually. So that I think will be like 4 days in a row. I'll tell you who that's going to be in a second. Before I do that, I'll tell you, for those of you who weren't here at the very beginning of the stream, I'm putting a lot of thought and effort into trying to strategize the ideal model for kind of like, if I were to leave academia, whether it be through my own choice or not my choice, how could I possibly design an intellectual life in which I basically do my own work as much as possible, but I'm also giving people such as yourselves stuff that you really want related to the stuff that I do that you're interested in. And so I've been asking people, just straight up asking for input from my fans and like my first set of patrons that I have on Patreon. And based on all the feedback, basically what I'm doing now is, one, I'm putting on Patreon a whole bunch of stuff from my hard drive, like previous writings, book manuscripts, proposals, and just content, like the best content that's kind of sitting on my hard drive that I just haven't had the time to finish quite yet, but it's there and it's ready to be read by people who are interested in it. I'm going to make a bunch of that available on Patreon starting today. And then what I'm doing, and again, this is based on input. People basically requested something like this. Um, I'm going to do a monthly private seminar. It's going to be like a graduate level seminar. So just like you do in a PhD program, it's going to be student led, or, student led. It can be anyone, the participants, right? I'm going to think of myself as the teacher, but really it's more that I'm just like the host, right? And then there'll be participants or students, and it can be anyone. And in groups that are no bigger than five is going to be the maximum. So it'll be small groups. Once a month, we'll meet for 2 hours in a kind of private video conference, and people can present ideas on whatever they want, really. And so it's a kind of weird twist on basically what is the PhD or graduate level seminar format. And so, think about maybe if you have ideas that you've really been wanting to work on. Maybe there's like some big blog post you've been wanting to write, but you haven't been able to find the time, or you're not sure. Or maybe you want to write a book. Maybe you've always wanted to write a book and you're just not quite sure how to go about it. Maybe you don't have the motivation. Maybe you have a hard time holding yourself accountable. The idea of this kind of monthly seminar session is that you'll have a focused place one time a month on a set schedule where other smart people, at the very least myself, will be able to give you constructive feedback on anything that you're working on, really. So it'll be a 2-hour session, up to 5 people at a maximum. And yeah, you can give like about a 15-minute lecture or presentation. It can be really anything, depending on what it is you're working on, whatever sort of presentation or format fits your project and your goals. You have the floor, and everyone will give you their undivided attention for about 15 minutes, and you can kind of pitch anything you want. It might be an update on what you presented the previous month. It might be a totally new project. It could be anything. And then for everyone who does that, I will give my undivided attention, and I'll give my best, most constructive feedback to help you like with your projects. And also other people in the session will be encouraged to also give feedback or whatever. So it's basically going to be replicating the experience of a PhD level seminar. That's usually how graduate school seminars are structured. It's kind of led by the participants, and the professor is kind of there to mostly give structure and feedback and support and facilitate, really. So yeah, and it could go in interesting directions, like depending on how many people sign up for this. If like a large number of people sign up, let's say like 15 people sign up for that, let's say, who knows? I don't know what the demand for this will be, but I know at least some people really want this kind of thing. Let's say like if 15 people sign up, then I could do a thing where I basically put people into the 3 different groups of 5 based on shared interests. So in some sense, the more people that do it, the more options we have for making each of the seminars a little bit more refined. We could potentially talk about doing like reading groups where maybe we all read stuff and everyone presents on sections of the book or something like that. What exactly we do in the sessions can be somewhat flexible, and we can be experimental about that as we go. But that is one of the more novel and innovative ideas based on what people have told me about what they want, that I'm going to start unrolling. So all of this is like up and available to be, you can sign up for this stuff like from today. So definitely keep it in mind. If you have any questions or thoughts or comments or input on, maybe a better way of doing it, feel free. My DMs are always open. And yeah, so if you're interested in those things, check out the Patreon. If you have any questions, shoot me a message or whatever. I could also maybe work out like other arrangements if people have thoughtful feedback. And as always, if you want to get in on the Discord server, just shoot me a DM on Twitter, and I can get you in on that. I think I'm folding that into the Patreon a little bit. But if you're broke and you don't even want to give $1 a month, that's totally cool. You can still get in the Discord server. You just gotta ask me nicely. So yeah, I don't think Razib is watching anymore. By the way, he's out of here. I don't know if you've noticed that. But I can tell him, or you can tell him your messages on Twitter, I'm sure, if you want. So all right, I think that's all I got for you this evening. Thanks everyone, as always. Very grateful for your attention. Oh yeah, and tomorrow I did say I would tell you. Tomorrow I'm gonna have Eli Schiff, who is a design critic. Oh, okay. I didn't realize. Sorry, Oswald. I didn't realize. So Razib is in the chat. Okay, that's cool. Okay, Michael. Sorry. I didn't realize that. I didn't catch it. Yeah. Tomorrow I'm gonna have Eli Schiff. Eli is a design critic, and I think he's like a pretty well-respected design critic. I don't think he's alt-right. I don't know. Is he? He's just someone on the internet who I talk with. Seems like a nice guy. How alt-right is he? I don't know. Maybe you could inform me in the chat now. But I mean, he's a design critic. Like, how right-wing can a design critic be? I hear someone is a design critic, and I assume that they're like a lefty, more or less. But that's just my stupid stereotyping, probably. I don't know. I've interacted with him on the internet. He seems like a nice guy. And does Eli have any especially evil viewpoints I should be especially aware of? He does interviews with David Duke. Really? You're trolling me, aren't you? I'll look into it. I've interacted with him on the internet. Seems like a nice guy. Well, I'll look into it. But that is going to that's a tentative plan. Unless I go and find some like really evil things on his like website or something like that. I'll be talking with Eli Schiff tomorrow night. He's a design critic. Seems like a smart dude, interesting dude, and so that'll be tomorrow night, probably around well, in the evening time, around the same time as I usually do these, and yeah, and then we're also going to have R. Scott Backer on October 30th. So put that in your calendar. We're going to have Claire Lehman, the editor of Quillette. She's going to be on here sometime next week. We haven't found a specific day yet, but we're getting that sorted. So stay tuned for that. And I also have other people like Stephen Shaviro, who is a kind of academic theorist, philosopher, who's written about accelerationism, among other things. Stephen Shaviro is going to be joining us. I have to message him. I owe him a message. We need to finalize the date, but he's confirmed he's happy to do it. And John David Redden, is it? Yeah, I think John David Redden is the name. I might be butchering that or misremembering it, but he's also said he'll do it. He and I also have to find a date. Yeah, I'm a little behind schedule with stuff. For someone who's not working his job, I'm pretty busy. I'm staying pretty busy. I'm like putting a lot of effort and time into trying to, yeah, I mean, since I don't have academic responsibilities at the moment, I'm basically spending all day thinking, like, if I could design an intellectual life from the ground up purely based on the internet and make it financially sustainable in a way that works really well for other people also, that makes them happy and makes them happy to throw a little bit of money, what would this look like? What would I have to do? How would I set it up? And I'm basically just working full time right now doing that. And we'll see. I mean, I just have to have an open mind. And if something works, roll with it. If something doesn't work, change it up. And yeah, so Gregory Cochran could be a good guest for sure. I'd be happy to talk with him. I read the 10,000 Year Explosion. I could definitely ask him some questions about that. So I'll keep that in mind. Oliver Traldi, I know him personally, so he would do it. Lemoyne, if I'm pronouncing it right, Lemoyne, I don't know how you pronounce it. He might be a little skeptical of me because I vaguely kind of included him in my BAP Vox conspiratainment videos. So he might think that I'm whack job, or he might think that I'm out to get him. I could definitely get Oliver Traldi though. I'll reach out to him soon. Who else? Oh, John David Ebert. Sorry, yeah. Forgive me. I'm sure he's not listening to this, so it's all right. Who else are you saying? Oh, Doug Lane. That actually would be an interesting one. I hope he would do my show. I know he's a little bit more allergic to the right wing than I am, but I did a podcast with Doug Lane. Actually, I was on the Zero Books podcast. If you Google it, you can find it. And he's a nice guy. I like Doug Lane. He seemed like a smart guy. I was fine to talk with. Enjoyed talking with him. I don't know exactly how allergic he is to, right wing stuff, but I mean, I think he might. I can ask him. Yeah, so that's a good suggestion. Let's see. Who else are you saying? Morteza says that I couldn't contribute to a conversation with Cochrane. Well, look, dude, I know what I know and I know what I don't know. So I don't try to contribute to conversations that I don't have anything to add to. So no, I wouldn't. I could have a good conversation with Gregory Cochrane. I could ask good questions. But yeah, his expertise is obviously very different than mine. I would not pretend to, you know, um, be equal conversational partners on those topics. I would have McCrump's back on if he wants to. What else? Yes, Oswald. I don't talk about my Antifa activity on here just because I haven't, I'm thinking about other things. But yeah, my podcast with Doug Lane was all about Antifa because a lot of people don't know this, but like I am basically Antifa. I mean, I'm an active member of anti-fascist groups, and I have been for the past several years. Like I do like black bloc demos and shit like that. So yeah, when people like call me racist or fascist or something, like they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, all good suggestions. True Diltom, I will he's been suggested many times. I'll look into it. E. Michael Jones. You all love E. Michael Jones and True Diltom. You love these guys. I'll look into them. I just never heard of them until you folks. So if it's someone that I've heard of, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'll ask them. If it's someone I've never heard of, you have to say it like a million times before I'm like, okay, maybe I'll look into it. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for hanging, as always. Does Cochrane do podcasts? It can be hard to get a word in. But yeah, no, I wouldn't want to get a word in. For certain types of people, I want to have a conversation. I want to talk with them. And then for other certain types of people, I just want to ask questions and I want to listen to what they think and I want to listen to what they know and try to learn what they know. So I think if I were to talk with Gregory Cochrane, it would definitely be one of the latter. Does he do podcasts though? Is he open to public speaking? You don't see him out and about that much, I don't think. So I wasn't sure. Actually I see Richard Harper. Hi, Richard Harper. I remember you from Twitter. Good to see you in here. I've never heard of Greg Johnson. If I pay him $100, he would do it. Well, I would love to be able to pay someone $100 to join me on the live stream, but I don't think that's in the cards right now. Okay, how about this? If my Patreon increases by $100 this evening, I will offer it directly to Gregory Cochrane. How about that? To come on the show. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for hanging out. As always, my brain is going kaput. So yeah, I'm out of here. 12:04 a.m. from Southampton, England. I'm over and out. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. I wish you the best, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.